want to cause a little trouble with Peter Darbee. That's what we're doing here today.
And I do not understand why PG&E is just plowing ahead installing smart meters when lots and lots of cities and counties are opposing this.
This is really an outrage what PG&E is doing. The fact is that cities and counties have formal ordinances designed for wireless communication technology devices. They have formal ordinances, and PG&E and the CPUC are completely disregarding the cities and counties ordinances, and they are not going through the formal review and planning processes for this type of devices. It's an outrage.
Fairfax, I think they're the only one that have come out and put a definite moratorium on smart meter installation in that town. How did you feel when you heard that news?
I felt wonderful that the local authority, local government is standing up to the state, standing up to PG&E. Fairfax passed an ordinance last week that would ban smart meters in the town based on that town's wireless antenna ordinance already. So Fairfax is the first, but we expect a number of communities throughout the state to join them. On Tuesday evening, Watsonville directed their city attorney to do everything in their power to prevent the installation of smart meters within the town of Watsonville. And this brush fire is only going to grow as people learn about the health risks.
I made the sign, smart meters could make 120,000 people homeless, and I made that sign because of a very important statistic. In 1998, the California Department of Health Services did a comprehensive survey and found that there were 120,000 people in California alone that were electromagnetically sensitive and could not work because of it. So you can be sure if they can't work and they're going to have 3 smart meters on their house, each one approximately 1,000 times stronger than a cell phone, they certainly will not be able to live in their house, let alone work. So we're going to essentially be homeless. Some will be living tents, some will be leaving the country, and some will just be finding alternative, temporary housing, such as in Fairfax for a while until we see what happens there.
Now, what types of health problems can these smart meters cause, and have you heard of any that they have caused so far?
Well, just at a time when we're learning more and more about the health risks of using cell phones. For example, a recent 10-year international study found that there was a 40% increase in the risk of glioma, brain tumors, for people who have used cell phones heavily over the past 10 years. Does it really make sense to be rolling out that same technology to millions of homes throughout California and taking a risk with our health? So, symptoms and diseases that have been linked to EMF radiation include cancer of various types, sleeplessness, DNA disruptions. There are peer-reviewed scientific literature that the FCC, who are responsible for keeping us safe from these emissions in the U.S., simply are not paying attention to. If these smart meters were installed in a country like Russia, for example, they would be illegal because that country considers the emissions from these meters too high.
We'd like to see the CPUC put a immediate moratorium on the smart meters, and I'd like to see them banned.
We're here to stop it, period.
Who's Peter Darbee?
Peter Darbee is the CEO of PG&E, and he's hiding behind global warming and saying that the smart meter program is for global warming, it's going to help the environment. There've been reams of documents when they presented this whole program to the CPUC. Global warming was never even mentioned. It was all automatic reading, AMR. They only care about profit and money. And we have informants from PG themselves who say that the components themselves cost about $15 to $20. We're all being charged between $500 and $600 per meter in the form of a 1.5% rate increase that CPUC gave PG&E, and then through the years when we get further rate increases it'll be over and top that. So they'll just be reaping the money in, and so it's forced consumerism. We're being forced to buy something we don't want for a variety of reasons: incorrect billing, lack of privacy, and destroying our health.
What is the occasion here? What is Peter Darbee going to be doing today?
He's going to be talking about how great smart meters are and how great they are for the environment and how it's going to save our environment.
What do you want to tell them?
That it's not going to. That in fact these smart meters use energy. It uses energy to buy the appliances that go into your house that will be connected to the smart meter, and then it takes energy to run it. And there's way more energy efficient ways to do this program.
People are going to cut their electricity use, not the smart meter. Smart meter doesn't save energy.
Peter Darbee.
Thank you, President Peavy, and thank you all for being here today. Today what I'd like to do is open up by talking about the significance of California. And as President Peavy was saying, I've spent a lot of time in Washington over the last several years trying to advance the cause of climate change. And many of you may know the history on that, but I historically came from not California, from the East Coast, and had more of a Republican conservative view. But when I became chairman and CEO of PG&E, I felt a tremendous personal and moral obligation to look into the question of climate change with an open mind and to develop a point of view. So because of the position of PG&E, we were able to meet with the top scientists on both sides of the issue. And we, a group of 15 of us, challenged and worked with very extensively the top scientists on both sides of the issue. And out of that, we came to the conclusion that those on the side that said climate change is a pressing and urgent issue really were most persuasive in that regard. And in fact, we were surprised at how weak the case was for those people. Some of whom have big names, really didn't present a persuasive case to suggest that climate change wasn't a big issue. And out of that, we developed a point of view, and that is that climate change is real, it's urgent, it's most likely the result of human interactions of what humans have done in their emissions to the atmosphere, and that the need for action was now. And, in 2006, it's amazing how far things have come in a short period of time, but that was big news for a corporate CEO, let alone an energy CEO, to step out and talk about. So it was from that platform that we first initiated our efforts at the Edison Electric Institute in our industry group, where there were 100 or 200 people that we were dealing with, the leaders of the utilities around the country. And I'll tell you, when we first came out with articulating our views, the way I would describe it is spitting in the wind. We were not well received in that regard, and there was a lot of press pushback and ridicule and questioning, like, PG&E, what are you doing? And we're trying to figure out what your game is and why you're doing it. And, our game was simple, that we wanted to be responsible, we wanted to think about our customers, and we wanted to think about the legacy and the impact we would leave on the earth. And so we fought, and I think members of our team fought courageously against and argued against people in the industry about how utilities in America, because the utilities sector is responsible for 40% of the carbon emissions in our economy, that it was incumbent upon utilities to step out and take a leadership position and do everything they could to reduce their own emissions. But then we viewed ourselves as a leader and aspired to be a leader, and so what we did was we said, it's our job to advocate for this. And so we spent incredible amounts of time in Washington, actually also in Chicago and other places around the country, late nights, weekends, and all, trying to forge an alliance and a conclusion among the utility industry. And we did. And we did. After 3 years of hard work, we did. And it was that alliance and the message we were sending there through the executive committee of the Edison Electric Institute, through our participation in United States Climate Action Partnership, through the Clean Energy Group, to move forward. And we worked hard in providing guidance and input with respect to...
Mr. Darbee, your smart meter program is a false solution. Stop it. You are forcing smart meters on her. You like to present this dumb meter solution. We're not opt out. We're very sorry that you're not opt out. Electromagnetic emissions. The people of California will not stand for this. Millions of people are going to be affected by the electromagnetic radiation.
I'm going to have to go camp somewhere.
Okay, if I may continue, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers when I conclude. I'd be happy to address people's questions on that topic as well as others. So what I wanted to communicate to you is we worked hard to try and get legislation in Washington with regard to climate change, and we're not successful. We saw the Waxman-Markey deal. We worked together with the troika of senators trying to get some result, and we were not successful. And the reason I describe those activities is it underscores now the role that California has, the responsibility we have and the opportunity we have to once again play a leadership role around the environment. It's essential that we do that, but it's also essential that as we approach the environment that we, and these tough questions, that we take into consideration a number of different views. One, we need to advance the cause with respect to climate change as rapidly as we can. But we need to do so as rapidly as our public is willing to come along with us. Secondly, our customers are very concerned about the cost of their service. And so when we think about the cost of implementation of a climate strategy, we need to be sensitive to the fact that people are very concerned about rates. And in fact, if the impact on rates becomes too high for them, there will be a rebellion against the movement with respect to climate change. And the consequence of that is to set back the progress that we made in California, but also the model, or the progress we're making with respect to being a model for the rest of the United States. So that's very important. And then I think the last thing is we have to think about, are we doing this in a commonsensical fashion? Are we being practical? Are we being cost effective? Are we being efficient and effective? And that's critically important. So President Peavy mentioned earlier, has mentioned in the past certainly, about the joint paper that I did with Chris Field at the Carnegie Institution, which is entitled Climate Change for Policymakers and Business Leaders. And this was an effort with one of the top scientists on the issue of climate change to address this issue. He, in fact, chairs one of the major panels in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and have that be a partnership with the CEO of a utility, looking at the question of climate change and putting together in a concise package what is the evidence for climate change, what are the consequences for us, and what are the actions that we need to take in order to combat this as quickly as possible. And the approach of that is to take a common sense solution to the question of climate change. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. You know, historically, climate change has been an issue that has been really for people left of center. But more and more, there are a lot of very thoughtful people that have started to embrace this topic who are centrists or right of center. And I think for people who have questions and doubts, and there probably aren't that many people in this room compared to, let's say, a meeting in New York City, the questions about climate change really aren't big ones. But I think it's important to note, for example, that 8 4-star generals and admirals looked at this question. They were appointees of the Bush administration. They looked at this question. They put together in a document called the National Security and Threat of Climate Change, a very compelling document. And when you read this, it's pretty alarming. So this was by people who are right of center, clear-eyed, practical people, our military leaders, and they said to President Bush at the time, this is a huge problem and we need to deal with it. We need to deal with it today. In addition to that group, the former head of the CIA, Jim Woolsey, CIA for President Bush, has said that this is a huge problem with huge strategic issues for the United States and needs to be dealt with. On our board of directors, the president of the Carnegie Institute, Richard Mazur, former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, also has said he describes climate change as the greatest challenge mankind has ever faced, and the need for action to deal with it is now. More recently, George Shultz has come out in opposition to Prop 23, leading that effort as chairman of the committee, as I understand it, and a leading Republican. So what we're seeing is more and more people from all parts of the spectrum are saying it's a real problem and we need to deal with it. But you know, today I probably am preaching to the choir in that regard, that many of you believe it is a problem. But what I do want to emphasize today is the need for us to be cost effective and efficient at every turn in dealing with this, and to use common sense in dealing with it. And I'm going to get specific now about how we need to do that. And that might not always be areas of agreement with you all who do believe that climate change is a major problem. So let's talk about what PG&E is doing. First of all, PG&E was the only utility in California to support the implementation of AB 32. And on top of that, a group of one of only a few companies. We continue to support the rollout of AB 32. We also support the idea of a renewable portfolio standard, an RPS, but what we're arguing for is that we have to think about how to do that most cost effectively. And therefore, what we've argued is we need to be able to include renewables from other states in that process. There are many here in California that would like to build walls around California because, one, they're renewable producers and they want a smaller market so they can get higher prices for their renewables, or two, they're involved with the labor movement and they want to make sure that these renewable projects are built by unionized labor. Climate change is the primary objective that we have to deal with, and therefore what we can't afford to do as a state, as a nation, is to approach this on a balkanized basis. That is to build walls around California and each state. Climate change is a planetary problem, and we need to approach it through planetary cooperation. We've worked with U.S. CAP, as I've mentioned, pushing for federal legislation and EEI. We've talked about that also. We've moved ahead with new technology, some of which we're going to talk about today. I can see that people are anxious to talk about the smart grid. You're anxious to talk about smart meters, and I will talk about them and answer people's questions in that regard. We have reinvigorated the focus on energy efficiency. You know, unlike the rest of the United States, California really has shown great leadership by putting together an energy policy and strategy. And out of that has come the preferred loading order, which has suggested that we start with energy efficiency, then we move to demand management, then we move to renewable generation, and after we've exhausted the good opportunities there, then we look at conventional generation. And I commend the Commission and the leaders here who have helped formulate that approach. We're far ahead of where the United States is in that regard, and that kind of leadership is important. Not all of you will agree that nuclear should play a role to the future of clean energy in the United States or across the world. We do believe that nuclear has an important role to play. Speaking for PG&E, we're not ready to build a new nuclear power plant, but we do think that it's a good idea for places like Georgia, the Southeast, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, where there's a lot of broad support for nuclear energy because it is baseload energy and also it is carbon free. What we do believe is it's important to renew the license for Diablo Canyon. Diablo Canyon is a treasure, really, for the state of California, for the people of California. It produces energy at about 3 to 4% a kilowatt hour, and there's no carbon emissions associated with it, and that energy is baseload power. So that's an important part of what our beliefs are with respect to fighting climate change. We also look to the future, and we see electric vehicles being incredibly important to dealing not only with the issue of climate change, but also with the issue of energy security for America. The electric vehicle is far more efficient and cleaner than the internal combustion automobile, and we should definitely pursue that, and PG&E is working with the Commission to advance that cause and to prepare the infrastructure to meet that challenge. So I talked about the need for being cost efficient and effective as we move forward. And I think that's critical because, as I say, if we don't do that, many people in California will push back against us. What our polling has suggested in market studies is people believe that it's important to be as sustainable, as environmentally and friendly a company as one can be. But at the same time, what they've shown is their willingness to pay up for that is, pretty small, maybe 10%, maybe 12%. And so I think the message for all of us is we need to think that through. So how do we turn that into specific recommendations? I've said to you that we support the implementation of AB 32. We oppose as a company Prop 23, which would delay the implementation indefinitely of Assembly Bill 32. We announced our opposition a few weeks ago. But as we look at the implementation of Assembly Bill 32, we are working with the California Air Resources Board to do a number of things. First of which is we've argued that there ought to be allowances allocated under a cap-and-trade program to the utilities, and that those allowances, the value of them, should be passed through to customers completely and immediately, so the impact on customers is minimized and the cost of a cap-and-trade program is minimized. Secondly, cap-and-trade programs work with the idea of offsets. Offsets are used to reduce the cost of compliance. And what PG&E is calling for is an abundant supply of offsets. They have to be real, they have to be measurable, they have to be incremental, they have to have integrity. But assuming they meet those standards, then offsets can reduce the cost of implementation of the cap-and-trade program. Next, because of our experience with deregulation in California and the energy crisis, which many of you are very familiar with, it occurs to us that we may have a view of how the model should be implemented with respect to cap-and-trade, but just as they did with implementing the bill AB 1890, the reality didn't turn out like the theory. And so a cost collar would produce a minimum floor for the cost of carbon, and let's say $10 per ton, and it would establish a ceiling of, let's say, $30 per ton. And that way, a cap-and-trade program could not get off track in a way that could have a very detrimental impact on customers. And so we think that that's very important. The last element is that we are arguing strongly for the allowance of out-of-state renewables on the order of at least 40% of total renewable activity. And what that will do is keep the market as broad as possible and lower the cost to our customers. With regard to energy efficiency, we think that energy efficiency is great. We're leaders in it. We think it's the first solution that people should look to. 30 years ago, California established a brilliant path, and that was decoupling, which eliminated the incentive for electric companies to sell more power. But what California has struggled with has been energy incentives. This commission has embraced, at the commission level, as policy, the idea that energy incentives are appropriate. I think the commissioners understand that if you want progress, you get a lot more progress with incentives than through a command and control regimen. What has happened, though, is the Commission has struggled with implementing energy incentives for energy efficiency. And the result of that is there hasn't been clarity or transparency around the mechanism. The consequence or outcome has been that last year the three utilities argued that they had met and exceeded the targets, at least two of the three. Those results were audited by the Natural Resources Defense Council, and they concluded that the utilities were correct. However, opponents to that point of view argued that not only should the utilities not get the maximum amount, they shouldn't get any at all, or they argued that the utilities didn't perform and should be penalized. And that kind of ambiguity doesn't make sense. I can see us arguing over, plus or minus 5%. But if there's that much uncertainty, what happens is the benefits of incentives aren't being realized for the customers. Utilities are unclear what the program is, and most importantly, the people that measure the performance of utilities, Wall Street, puts no credence and belief in energy incentives as an ongoing possible source of profitability for utilities, and so they don't value them. And that basically undermines the whole system. So what I would implore the Commission to do is to follow the leadership of the commissioners and the policy that's been voted on and approved, and create a clear, transparent, dependable mechanism for energy incentives. In the past, I have to share with you kind of this harsh criticism. The chairman of Duke Energy has said, California has established a model not to follow on energy efficiency incentives. I want that chairman and the chairman of other utilities in the country and thought leaders to say, California has worked through and has established a model for energy incentives. They've given the vast bulk of the benefits to the customers, but they've left enough incentives for utilities. The third element of the strategy is smart grid. And PG&E has been a pioneer in smart grid. And PG&E, in fact, recently was selected as the 7th most innovative company in the United States by Fast Company, the magazine. And that's not the 7th most innovative utility. That's the 7th most innovative company, together with companies like Apple and Nike and companies like that. So we've been a pioneer on smart meters. But the question is, are we going to be punished for that? As we talked with our colleagues around the company, I said, and they talk about the criticism we've gotten in that regard. I said, pioneers get a lot of arrows. They got a lot of arrows when they were, breaking into America, and we're getting a lot of arrows here. And the fact of the matter is, those people that come second or third can look at the path that's been created, and they can see where people did things better or they did things worse, and they can, of course, correct. And they can look smarter than them. But it takes a pioneer to break that initial ground, and unless somebody has the courage, the guts, and the vision to do it, no one ever gets to America or gets to the West Coast. And so we've done that. And I think there are areas that we could have communicated better, we could have educated better. I think a mistake that we made was we thought we were rolling out infrastructure and technology, and we underestimated the interest that customers would take in a meter on the side of their house. And so I think we could have communicated that better. And we're looking now at how we can communicate more effectively given where we are. So as we go forward, I think the stakes are very great because once again, California is in the position to serve as the model for the rest of the United States when the United States has said it's not ready to move forward. And the challenge that we have is, are we going to be a good model or a bad model or an indifferent model? And I want you to know that our company and our people are committed to doing the best we can, being the best utility we can, and working constructively with President Peavy, with the Commission, with the staff to get there. I'm going to leave you at the end with our strategy. This is the thing, every time I get with employees, I talk about company strategy. Company strategy is really to run PG&E like a competitive company. I've spent most of my life in competitive companies, a fair amount in regulated companies. But the first element of the strategy is customer centricity, to understand the needs of our customers and to serve them well. The second leg of the strategy is operational excellence, to revamp and re-engineer and transform our processes so that we serve our customers better, faster, and more cost-effectively every day. The third element of the strategy is that we need to have constructive relations with our regulators and also with our policymakers. And so we seek to do that. We seek to engage in dialogue, not scream at each other, but to listen to people with different points of view and to respect them and to argue for our position. But that position ties back to our customers and serving them well. The fourth element is to be an environmental leader, to be out there running our business in the most sustainable fashion and arguing to others that we are. And the fifth element of the strategy is to be involved in our communities. And I'll tell you, I go to a lot of community events, whether it's building solar rooftops at Habitat for Humanity, or at Diablo Park on Earth Day, or in Berkeley doing it, and I see a lot more blue shirts from PG&E than I do from any other company. So we're being really successful there, and I encourage you to look for, PG&E volunteers out there giving back to their community. So every place I go, I ask people about that strategy and say, are we missing something? Do we have it right or not? And the only comment that's consistent that comes back to me is people say, that's a great strategy, and what you need to do each and every day is ask yourself how you're executing against that strategy. Are you executing on it? Let me just say that we're a big company, $45 billion in assets, 20,000 employees, 100 years old. We have lots of systems and lots of processes that are old. We started rebuilding them and really transforming them 5 years ago. I thought we could get it all done in 5 years and dramatically improve the service that we could provide people. I was wrong. I think it's probably a 10-year project. We're about halfway there. But we're committed to it. We're working on it to serve our customers and our communities as responsibly and as well as we can. And with that, I'm ready to take the questions.